Welcome to the first learning outcome, where we build the vocabulary of globalization. By the end, you'll be comfortable with the core terms and concepts economists use to describe our interconnected world. Let's start with the big idea itself. Globalization is simply the growing integration of the world's economies, so that goods, money, people, and ideas cross borders far more freely than they used to. Think about the smartphone in your pocket. It might be designed in California, built from chips made in Taiwan, assembled in China, and sold to you here in Britain. The key thing to remember is that globalization is a process that's still unfolding, not a single event. Economists usually break globalization into 4 dimensions, and it's worth keeping these in your head. There's freer trade, cross-border investment, faster communications, and easier travel. Take a company like Zara. It trades across dozens of countries, invests in stores worldwide, coordinates its supply chain digitally in real time, and ships stock by air and sea. All 4 dimensions working together in one business. The first dimension is the freeing of trade. Over the past 70 years or so, countries have gradually cut tariffs, those taxes on imports, and quotas, the limits on them, through international agreements. This lets each country specialize in what it does best and swap the surplus, an idea economists call comparative advantage. It's why New Zealand lamb and Spanish tomatoes sit on UK supermarket shelves at prices that would once have surprised you. The second dimension is investment flowing across borders. When a firm builds or buys operations abroad, we call it foreign direct investment, or FDI. A classic example is Nissan choosing to build its car plant in Sunderland, bringing thousands of jobs and Japanese manufacturing know-how to the northeast of England. Britain is one of the world's biggest destinations for this kind of investment, and one of its biggest sources too. Dimensions 3 and 4 are about shrinking distance. Faster communications mean a UK firm can manage suppliers in Vietnam over a video call and sell online to customers anywhere overnight. Cheaper air travel and the container ship move people and goods around the planet at a fraction of the old cost. Economists sometimes call this the death of distance, because geography just doesn't hold businesses back the way it once did. If you want evidence that globalization is real, look at the trade figures. Over the past 50 years, world trade has grown much faster than world output, which means economies are selling and buying a rising share of everything they make. The UK is a very open economy, exporting and importing a large slice of its GDP. When trade climbs faster than production, that's one of the clearest fingerprints of globalization. Here's globalization in a single, everyday object: a cup of coffee from a UK high street chain. The beans were grown by farmers in Brazil, Colombia, or Ethiopia, shipped across oceans in containers, then roasted and packaged, perhaps in yet another country. The cup, the lid, the milk, and the branding each come from different suppliers, and your card payment clears internationally in seconds. One simple purchase quietly depends on trade, investment, communications, and travel all at once. Businesses don't usually leap onto the world stage overnight. They tend to grow into it in stages. A firm might start by selling only at home, then begin exporting, then set up offices or factories abroad, and finally operate as one integrated global business. Think of how Dyson began in the UK and now designs, manufactures, and sells right across Asia and beyond. Each step deepens its involvement in the global economy. Now let's define 4 terms you'll lean on for the rest of the unit. A multinational company owns or controls operations in more than one country. Global finance is the worldwide web of banks and markets that shifts money about. Trade barriers are the government measures that hold back imports, and integration is the process of national economies becoming more tightly linked, as we see with trade agreements and single markets. Let's look more closely at multinational companies, sometimes called transnational corporations. These firms are headquartered in one country but operate in many. Think Apple in the United States, Toyota in Japan, or Unilever spanning the UK and the Netherlands. They place each activity wherever it's cheapest or most effective, a strategy known as the global division of labour. Remarkably, the biggest of them earn more in a year than the entire economies of many small nations. Multinationals rarely make a product in one place anymore. They split it into stages and scatter those stages around the world. The high-skill work, design and software tends to stay in economies like the United States and Britain, while assembly often heads to lower-cost countries such as China or Vietnam. This spread of production is what we call an international supply chain or a global value chain. One finished product can carry the fingerprints of a dozen countries. Apple and Nike are the textbook examples of this outsourced model. Apple designs the iPhone in California but owns barely any factories itself, contracting firms like Foxconn to assemble it in China and India, with components arriving from Japan, South Korea and Taiwan. Nike likewise designs its trainers in the United States but has them made in independent factories across Vietnam, Indonesia and China. Both keep the valuable design and branding at home and send the labour-intensive work abroad, which is globalisation in action. Global finance is the network of banks, stock markets and currency markets that moves money around the world, and the City of London is one of its beating hearts. It lets firms raise capital, trade currencies and manage risk around the clock, wherever they happen to be. The upside is easy access to investment. The downside is that trouble travels fast. The 2008 global financial crisis, which began with mortgages in America, spread across the world within months. Not everything flows freely, of course, and governments have several tools to hold imports back. A tariff is a tax on imported goods that pushes their price up. A quota is a hard limit on how much can come in. A subsidy props up home producers so their goods seem cheaper, and regulations set standards that foreign goods must meet. When the United States and China traded tariff blows in their recent trade war, you could see all of this playing out in real time. So why put up barriers at all if freer trade is the goal? Governments might want to protect a young or strategic industry, save jobs, or hit back in a trade dispute, an approach we call protectionism. The tariffs many countries have placed on cheap imported steel to shield their own steelworks are a good example. Most economists argue that freer trade lifts living standards overall, even though particular industries and workers can lose out. Countries can knit their economies together to different depths, and there's a neat ladder here. A free trade area removes tariffs between members, as the old North American deal did. A customs union adds a shared tariff on outsiders. A single market goes further, letting goods, services, money and people move freely, as in the EU, and an economic union shares policy and often a currency, like the Eurozone. Each rung means giving up a little more independence for a little more integration. The UK's own story shows that integration isn't a one-way street. For over 40 years, Britain was part of the EU single market, weaving its trade tightly into Europe. Since Brexit, it has left both the single market and the customs union, and now trades with the EU under a free trade agreement instead. It's a powerful reminder that integration can deepen or partly unwind, and that it's a political choice as much as an economic one. Like most big economic forces, globalisation cuts both ways. On the plus side, consumers enjoy lower prices and wider choice. Firms reach bigger markets and cheaper inputs, and investment, jobs and technology flow to host countries. On the other hand, some industries can't compete and shed jobs. Inequality can widen, financial shocks spread quickly, and long supply chains carry an environmental cost. When the Suez Canal was blocked in 2021, the world got a sharp reminder of just how fragile those long chains can be. Jaguar Land Rover pulls all of these threads together in one company. This famous British car maker has been owned since 2008 by Tata Motors of India, which is inward foreign direct investment in a nutshell. Jaguar Land Rover designs and builds its cars in the UK but sells them worldwide, especially in China and America, with a supply chain and financing that stretch across the globe. In this single business, you can see multinationals, global finance, trade and integration all working at once. So why does all this vocabulary matter? These terms are the toolkit for the rest of the unit and for making sense of the modern economy. Once you understand multinationals, finance, barriers and integration, you can explain why prices, jobs and investment behave the way they do and weigh up debates about trade deals, Brexit and bringing production back home. In the next learning outcome, we'll put these tools to work on what has actually driven globalisation and how it's shaped the UK. Let's gather up what we've covered. Globalisation is the growing integration of the world's economies, visible in freer trade, investment flows, faster communications, and easier travel. Multinationals organise production and trade across borders through global value chains. Global finance moves money worldwide with all the opportunity and risk that brings. And trade barriers like tariffs and quotas hold imports back. And economic integration runs from simple free trade areas all the way to single markets and economic unions, as Britain's EU membership and Brexit so clearly show. That brings us to the end of this first learning outcome, where we've built the core vocabulary of globalisation, from the 4 dimensions and multinationals through to global finance, trade barriers and integration. If you'd like to go deeper, the further reading gathers some excellent starting points, including Stiglitz on globalisation and its discontents, and the standard economics texts by Sloman and Anderton. The World Trade Organization's annual reports and the Office for National Statistics are well worth a look for the latest trade data. And the case studies on Tata and Jaguar Land Rover and on Apple and Nike bring the theory to life. Do take some time with these before you tackle the assignment.